Today, I'd like to have a more free-ranging discussion, including a lot of you, about any problems you might be having on what you consider your spiritual path. But first, I'd like to make some remarks at my major teacher, Robert, and the secondary teacher, Nisargadatta, are both Yanis. We're both Yanis, which means that the teachings were based on listening to satsangs and talks. And you're supposed to learn what they say, try to figure out what they say, and then try to believe what they say. Nisargadatta often says it's a matter of conviction. Conviction that there is an absolute, a witness. Conviction that you don't exist as a person, and lots of other things. This is an incredibly difficult way to practice spirituality because it uses the mind in order to destroy the mind. In order to get conviction, you have to listen to the concepts and then believe the concepts, such as the concept that you are everything or you are consciousness itself, or you are beyond consciousness, prior to consciousness. And this belief is a difficult thing for people like myself who always had doubts about the truth I was being taught, or never got clear about what Ramana was about, or what Robert was about. And Nisargadatta was much easier because he seemed to talk in down-to-earth language, but he seemed to vary what it meant from satsang to satsang. I studied Nisargadatta for probably 30 years before I thought I was beginning to understand him. And it was only when I read his early book, Self-Knowledge and Self-Realization, that he talked about energies, worship, surrender. That he began to talk about experiences I had and which were very meaningful to me. Frank, that's a great godly background you have there. Your head on the peak of wisdom. So let me tell you my overview of spirituality. Don't listen to those who say you don't exist, or there's no self. This is an idea they're trying to plant in you to lose your sense of being a human. They want you to take on an identity as something other than human, like consciousness itself or God. Don't listen to those who say you're God either, because you have too many ideas about what God is. As much as possible, just believe yourself and what you know. Acquire a lifelong path of examining yourself, watching your mind, watching your emotions, watching as you plumb yourself. What kind of base beliefs do you have or desires do you have? Do you want to be wealthy? Do you want security for your body and your family? Do you want your own home? Do you want enlightenment but don't know what enlightenment is? Investigate everything. Take nothing for granted. Don't even take your own existence for granted, because that usually means you have 1,000 ideas about your position in society, in the world. So take all beliefs with a grain of doubt. Keep your attention focused on yourself. First, in the sense of being able to constantly look inside of yourself from the position of your two eyes. Learn to look backwards into your head, towards the third eye, here, an inch or two inside. Start there and learn to look downwards. Now, Vijay said he always had a difficulty doing that because he couldn't imagine looking inside of his skin. But what you're doing really is creating the canvas for you to explore inside of yourself. And there's a couple different avenues to do that. One is by looking within to that darkness and learning to look deeper, like into your heart and into your gut. And the more you look, the more light you'll see inside of yourself. The insides will tend to become luminous with the light of consciousness. But the other way of exploring yourself is through feeling. Many who explore themselves just by observation become bereft of feeling because all of their energy's in their brain. And the brain is really attached to looking, visualization. Don't practice spiritualities where you have to do imaginations. It can screw you over. Now, I don't make that a universal concept because looking inside to find certain things or feeling inside to find certain things can help enhance your feeling of emotions, and definitely of energies, the so-called spiritual energies or chi or kundalini. Richard Gordon's book on Healing Hands, his first book on quantum touches, filled with great exercises so you can learn to feel the energies. And when you begin to become able to feel the energies, it's a lot easier step from there to welcome the belief that you are not just your body, but your consciousness. And by consciousness, I mean, you don't pay attention just to the objects in your universe, like the television set or the pictures or the ceiling fan or the walls or the cats in your room. But you look at consciousness itself, which is invisible. But you're aware that you're aware. You're aware that your attention is to your right, to the wall, or straight ahead towards a television, or to your left with a window. You're conscious of a floor. You're conscious of the ceiling. Those are all objects in your consciousness, but what of consciousness itself? Now, this is very, very difficult to do, to become aware of consciousness itself. Except, for example, when you're looking at the ceiling, you become aware that you're looking at the ceiling. You're aware of looking. So your attention goes from being aware of the ceiling to being aware of yourself in here, being aware of the ceiling. Suppose you have recurring thoughts. Maybe you think about your girlfriend or your boyfriend. And when you think about them, you have feelings in your body of love or anger, or maybe something else. Maybe you feel something flowing in your heart that you've never been able to call love, but it's a feeling that you're feeling literally with your body. Be aware that you're connecting that feeling in your heart with an image of another person. It's all going on inside of you. There's nobody else there. They're not really important except as a trigger for your feelings. And then examine the feelings as they arise. Feelings as they arise during the day. And at the beginning, you'll become horrified at the number of feelings you have about everything in your day. How someone doesn't smile at you, or someone does smile at you and you wonder what it means. A relative calls and says hello and passes the time, and you feel how that feels. Like, oh my God, that was a waste of time. Or feeling relief that you finally made contact with that person. You become aware of everything about you. I know most of you are in relationship. So you think about the other a lot. And you probably also think about how they rub you the wrong way, how they tend to be bossy and try to tell you the way things are, and for you to have the same points of view as they have. They try to control you in that way. Or they control how the relationship works, who initiates contact and who doesn't. How do you react? Then you come to satsang, and how do you feel? How does a feeling at satsang differ from not coming? When you miss satsang, what do you feel? What do you feel when you look at me? Is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? The many, many, many people who have left satsang over the last many years haven't liked what they felt when they looked at me, or they felt contrary things. Some saw me first as a beautiful person, and then later on as a lizard person with lizard energy poisoning the Sangha. And then all the time, be aware of what you want. What is your primary wanting energy? Is it food? Are you a foodie? I had students that were foodies. It drove me mad. They had particular tastes in food. And they felt that mainstream people had no appreciation for all the garlicky stuffs they wanted. I had two students who were always taking me to places where they had a lot of garlic. I hated it. I wanted them to come to me with cafeteria style food I liked, with baked potatoes and broccoli and Brussels sprouts and peas and bread. And surprisingly, one of them, who was a movie producer, said, "My wife can't find anything to eat here. They didn't have any garlic there." Foodies can drive you mad. I remember at a time when I first became vegan 100 years ago or so, how driven I was for purity, about not eating meat in any way. That if a fork had touched meat, it had to be burnt and washed and so forth before I could use it and touch my precious lips with anything but veggies. Or how McDonald's makes its veggie burgers in the same oil they fry fries in, or whatever, and they're not pure. And how I get upset about the lack of purity. And vegans are like this. They tend to be ruthless in terms of their judgments about what to eat and not to eat. Some vegans won't eat any dairy except for ice cream. They make an exception for ice cream. Some make no exceptions whatsoever. But this kind of obsession can drive you mad. Now, Nisargadatta was peppered all the time by students that asked him, "You still eat meat? Why do you eat meat? Ramana didn't eat meat," etc., etc. And he said, "I eat whatever's put in front of me. Why begrudge me a few morsels of meat. I don't eat much at all anyway, and I didn't kill him. So he had gotten over his obsession with being vegan. But there are moralists that will never get over their obsession with being vegan. I think being vegan is a wonderful thing. When I first became vegan, I felt an immense weight being lifted from me, which was a sense of guilt I had eating meat and knowing the animals that were killed, thousands of them. Can you imagine a cow being killed for a hamburger? But I had a surgery for right hip replacement in 2014. And I started eating meat again to help heal the wounds and to enhance the healings a little bit at a time. Then a second operation in 2017 for the left hip. And I did it again. Now I'm torn between being vegan again and the pleasures of eating flesh, except that it makes me feel so not anxious, dirty when I do it. So my life is terribly conflicted. How about you? Actually, the conflict is not so deep in me anymore. I don't justify or have the need to justify my purity. But where are your hangups? We have hangups about how other people, me, Krima and I, how other people treat their pets, what they feed them, how often they take them to the vet, what they take them to the vet for. And we see such utter unconsciousness in the way many animal owners treat their pets, especially if you're involved in animal rights at all and no-kill shelters. You see the absolute ease that some people can discard animals they've been with for 10 years or so and turn them over to a kill shelter because they have to move and they don't think they can take their animals with them, rather than to do more extensive search to find landlords who will accept pets. They just abandon their cats or their dogs at their house. It's incredibly cruel. And I still judge that way. But I watch myself judge it and see that that's life. Some people just aren't very connected with other life forms except their own, or their relatives, or their partners, or wives, or husbands, boyfriends, girlfriends. The longer you practice spirituality and becoming aware of the life force within yourself, and you will discover the life force within yourself at some point, if you are consistent in investigating yourself, especially through feeling. Like I said, there are two major ways of investigating. One is through observation, looking for the I am, looking for whatever. How does Nisargadatta stated is, I forget. But I found the most powerful change in my own spiritual searching was when I made the change to feeling inside rather than looking inside. Feeling beingness rather than looking for beingness. When you feel beingness in your chest and your gut, you're well on your way to realizing the life force within you as a separate entity. The life force is how life manifests in you and through you. And you can see it at first like a host would see a guest entering the house of the body as something other, as I saw 11 or 12 years ago when God exploded in me as the life force. But now I feel the life force almost as a loving puppy, and we dance around together, almost giggling in the presence of each other. I no longer see the life force as the great God, the stupendous force, because that stupendous force fills me everywhere and has for many years. But I would be careful about reading and becoming a Yanni, because this Yanni path is based entirely on mind and doing self-investigation that affirms what the teachings are. You look inside yourself to find the life force. You look inside yourself to find the witness. You look inside of yourself to find the self. And there are so many different selves you can find. There's the self that the neo-Advaitins deny. And that's the idea of who you are. I'm a human entity living so-and-so with so-and-so, man, woman, lover, parent, children, wife, husband. And you identify as such, and you identify with your occupation. I'm a psychiatrist, or I'm a psychologist, or I'm a marketing engineer, or I'm a yogi, or I'm a self-searcher. These are all identities from the mind. And they disappear after looking into yourself for many years. Because what's more present to you is the feeling of being a body, the feeling of being alive, the feeling that there's something deep inside of you that's your real self, which has nothing to do with the mental identities that you have. I found the practice that best suited me for finding this level was to search for the one who feels, not the one who thinks. To search for where hearing takes place inside of you, in your psyche. Look for the source of all the things you do during the day. How you hear your voice. How you hear your name calling out to you. Aggie, where do you feel it in you? Don't answer. Just look, feel. Mark, can you find the source where you heard that? Bernadette, can you feel it? Dean, can you feel it? Vesselina, you recognized your name and you recognized me as paying attention to you. Where did that happen inside of you? Can you find a place? For me, all of the time that I looked, it seemed to be taking place in the area near my heart. All those fundamental tasks that I did during life, like feeling myself or hearing something anywhere, even if it's a bird outside, where did the hearing take place inside of me? Is there an origin point where you hear? How do you find it? Do you find it by looking? Or do you find it by feeling, or both? What about the energies that you find inside of yourself? If you've been coming to this satsang long, you probably feel the energies. What's the locus of the feeling of those energies? I know I feel the energies in my hands, my arms, my face, all over my thorax and the gut, even down into my legs and feet. So the feeling is continuous throughout my body. Some places feel more of those energies than others. But where do I center my feeling from? Is there a center for feeling? These are the kinds of things you should look for in yourself and become aware of yourself. Rekha, where do you feel yourself? Where's your location? Yeah, for most people it's there. But you have to look in a way where you really look deeply and purposely for the looker. And you can actually find where the looking takes place. For me, it was like in the light interior of my chest. There were these dancing fingers of light when I heard my name calling. And following that led me to that area that I call myself. It's the deepest area within me, within my consciousness. And in this deep area, thinking never goes. It's too deep for thinking. Thinking is up here in a sphere of thought. But the feeling level is the basic level of light, beingness, consciousness, the life force. And when you can stay in this part here, it'll come by flashes. You'll see it for a moment and have an experience where your body disappears and you become everything. Or you can be looking inside of yourself, and then suddenly, without notice, you'll feel a great emptiness inside of yourself, that you're totally empty everywhere. It may scare the shit out of you because you feel there's no person in there. There's no central cognitive agency that's watching over your life. That happened to me. For 6 months, I was just emptiness. Open space. Thoughts rarely came. And if they did, they just passed through like a small cloud would go by my eyes or through my brain or outside. I think Osho makes that observation, that the thoughts really aren't yours. They're universal. And you're like a radio antenna that picks up certain frequencies, and you have a tuner. You are wired to accept certain thoughts and may never have other kinds of thoughts. And that seems so obvious to most people, that their thoughts are not like other people's thoughts. Other people think about totally different things. If you're a spiritual person, you're always wondering, what the fuck am I about? What the fuck is God about? Normal people hardly ever think like that, except in the case of a tragedy. They go through their day living their life without being concerned about who or what they are. But other people who are afraid of dying look everywhere for signs of life after death, which brings up the idea of life before birth. If there's life after death, there must be life before birth. So where's that thing in me that's there before birth and after death? And the only thing that makes any sense is the one who's asking the question was there before birth and after death. It's the wanderer. It's the seeker. It's the one that's exploring that's there. Right now, I'm exploring my body, my mind, the life force inside, and watching myself be aware of consciousness. Now, what is consciousness itself? Consciousness is the world that we create by having 5 or 6 or 7 senses. And it creates a world of form, images. sights and sounds, the existential world. But we seem separate from it most of the time. And is that sense of separateness real, or is it fake? Other people have experiences of becoming one with everything. So they go from being the witness to becoming the totality of that which is witnessed. This is all a part of life. I dare you try to make a theory out of that. I dare you to try to understand that. Because understanding would sort of fix you in place and not allow you to cross over into different dimensions or different personalities or different ways of seeing or being. So you get up knowledge and you read Nisargadatta and you love it. You read Ramana and you love it. You read the Ashtavakra Gita and you love it because you understand everything in them, but you also understand other things. The big point, though, is whether you're resting in that basic self inside of you or not. When you're in that, what I call zero state, where you're doing nothing except existing and living, you're happy. You're at peace. Nothing bothers you. Even if you're in pain, it can usually ignore the pain. Not in the sense that you really ignore it, but the pain isn't so important as being in that zero state. Because in that zero state, you feel peace and joy. And everything in the existential reality happens around you, including the reality of your body and your mind. When you're in that place of the zero state, maybe I should say that several times so Frank becomes really riled. Zero state, zero state, zero state. All that Ed talks about is a fucking zero state. What the hell does he mean by the zero state? When you're in the zero state, you don't want anything. You're complete. Now, you won't stay in the zero state all day. You may stay in the zero state and learn how to live staying in the zero state. But most of the time, you'll be tempted to go out of it and to throw yourself into activities, concentrating just on the activities. But certain fortunate people like Ramana didn't have to leave it anymore. They were always in it. And you can feel that too after a while. After you've stared at your insides for years and felt on your insides for years and gone through many workshops of self-exploration, read many books, practiced countless hours of meditation, you'll feel at home in yourself. But there's no need to go out. And when you do go out in order to get something to eat, you just do it. It doesn't take your attention away from you anymore. You can act in the world, yet you're always in you. You becomes like a heavy bubble of sentience. And that heaviness grounds you in your own being, including the life force and in consciousness. And you're not separate from it, but you can still feel separate from it as a witness. All these things are possible. Things you didn't think were possible are possible. You can be both the witness, and at the same time, you can be what is witnessed. There's no contradiction that you can't embrace when you're in yourself, because you see all contradictions are mental, created by the mind, partial viewing. Just watch yourself. And insofar as you can, learn how to love yourself. Because loving yourself and the life force in you, as well as loving consciousness, is the quickest way to get to know it. And after you know it deeply enough, it becomes you, and there's no need to love it anymore. But love is a good initial way to know yourself. That's why Muktananda always used to say, love yourself, worship yourself. And that God comes out of you as a concept. It may also be a feeling, but there's a concept attached to the feeling. Like I attached the label God to that first breakthrough of the Shakti awakening, where the energy ran through me so powerfully in the light. I said, this can't be anything other than God, because it's so goddamn powerful, more powerful than anything I ever was able to do or generate. And sometimes somebody else in you can bring out that power. Some person you're fascinated by. Some person in whose company you feel totally rested. Or you can feel the energy of God rising in you around that person. Something about them and you in relationship brings out something in you. It's not you, them. They're a trigger for feeling something in you that you attribute to them. But what they're doing is being a trigger. Because in most cases, you realize that you're creating them as separate individual, attributing certain qualities to them. And you can actually feel it. You can practice it on people. You can go to a coffee house, wearing a mask, of course, and look at the people and see how you feel about them in your chest, in your heart, in your beingness. Some people shook my world when I was around them. I felt such enormous power. or enormous love or enormous weight of feeling their humanity so well expressed by them, like Carl Rogers. Or the enormous love I felt for a woman. The enormous power I felt from another woman. But it was all in me. And once I recognized they were but a trigger, I could feel this all the time as my own. So, Veselina, you can feel by looking at Michael right now how he makes you feel. And realize that you're feeling. That you're feeling. That you're feeling. Maybe looking at him takes away a little from your sense of loneliness, living alone amongst the medical students that you have little to do with. And you feel at home with Michael. But that's your feeling. Recognize that's your feeling. That's your reaction to Michael, but he didn't really cause it. You caused it. That's your reaction. The same with any kind of reaction of feeling aggravated or disgusted by somebody else. They're really not that way, except to a lot of maybe other people that feel the same way. But it's your own feeling. You created it. It didn't deliberately create it, but you can own that you created it. You unconsciously created it. Something ticked you off about their appearance or the way they talked. They caused you to feel disgust or dismay or irritated. And all these feelings are in you. They're all you. They're not the other person. It's your reaction to the other person. And you own your reactions. You begin to own your reactions. So when you begin to own your reactions, you don't have to react. You can just feel them without a strong sense that they caused it. You caused it. You are the center of your own life. You own everything that happens to you. The grief, the joy, the happiness, the pain, sense of loss and loneliness, depression, anger, all of it's you. It arose in you. It didn't arise in that other person. It arose in you and your relationship with that other person. And this is where spirituality meets the reality of returning to the marketplace. You begin to own your reactions within the personal world of your family relationships and your friends and those you're attracted to or those you admire. And all of these kinds of things. You learn every moment as a learning experience as long as you turn your attention to yourself. Turn your attention to yourself. The secret of spirituality is it's all about you. It's all about you, Cassie. It has nothing to do with Ian. He's only a marker to piss you off. But it's you that's getting pissed off and letting yourself get pissed off. You don't have to. You can feel the pissed off and see, he didn't create it. It's yours. It's yours. Did I cause you to sneeze? Does anybody have any questions? You got to have questions. Questions about practice, questions about anything. Like, hey, Ed, how did you get to be so brilliant? That's a good question. I'll answer that. How did you develop such a wonderful personality, Ed? Maybe I should ask Maxie that.
I've been all around the vegan thing. I never really adopted it, but I was on a movie set with a vegan girl, and she was phobic about it. As you said, if the fork had touched meat, she would have, and this is a movie set, she's going to stop a production to have them bring her another plate because her fork had touched the meat. So that was one of the examples. And then I went to college in West Virginia where people slaughtered their own food, and they invited me to a pig slaughter, and I declined because I was afraid I'd pass out and embarrass not only them, but myself. So it sort of like if I had to kill my own food, I'd starve. But, and the other incident was when we went to China and being escorted into a restaurant past one wing where they were dining on cats and dogs. So I think I've seen it, you know, pretty much all the way around the track and in many, in whatever, instantiations, I guess. But I don't know. But yeah, I think, and of course the other thing that this with the zero zone, and I try not to bifurcate and try to go into a split mind moment, because what you asked and where I feel it is in my heart, and it just resonates there very deeply. As I've said, your songs now, what you did, you know, your time in the absolute, and then bringing it back to the marketplace is exquisite. It's coming from a place that is so deep that every time it just, I'm just crushed, and I love you. As I've said, what you share with us, Shakti and God manifest, is always exquisite and only gets deeper and only takes me deeper. Thank you, Edgy.
Yeah, you're welcome. Most welcome. What about you, Frank? Any questions?
Well, I have to come down from my mountain to talk to you, Ed, but I'll do my best. Couple of things. Would you agree that the only real freedom comes from the knowing that life is just happening, and that there is nobody who is guiding it or making it happen? I'll start with there, and I'll have a few other things. Would you agree with that statement or not, Ed?
More or less.
Okay.
More or less, because there are so many so-called spiritual people that have this idea that everything is good because it's all a lesson plan set up by God or some force to make us evolve into more and more spiritual beings, and that everything that happens to you is for your own benefit. And I think that's a really skewed ass way of looking at things. Instead, to have no idea about that one way or the other.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing.
Well, yes and no. A couple of mornings ago, I realized that I wake up about an hour and a half before I need to actually get out of bed. And there's this period of feeling real distressed. And the feeling is that I'm trying to get back to being the witness to the feelings. And then I eventually get up and get out of bed. And when I was talking with Judy and telling her, my wife, about this, she
Frank, you're frozen.
We may never hear what Frank was trying to say.
And he went into the 0 zone. Oh, gosh.
You went into the sarcastic zone. Right?
I'm sorry, my bad. I work with the material in the room. He learned
You
it from
read
the
the
best.
room. You read the room. Michael T. often has questions.
I decided I should shut up more because it usually gets me into trouble.
Ask away. Go ahead.
No, just point of information. I find that when I have to work harder and I get and do more in life, it takes away from being where I should be.
Yeah.
And I've got to learn how to, I find myself getting guilty because I find deep inside I'm just rejecting where I should be when I'm tempted to do what I need to do or what I think life is requiring me to do. But the great paradox, isn't it, that life itself is a means for us to, isn't it the vehicle for us to find ourselves too? Isn't it? It's so confusing.
I don't know what your question is, but I think you answered it. I'm not sure what your question is. Do you have a question?
I guess I just have to be more disciplined and not going to sucker myself into going too far in my work projects and other things that deviate me from the path.
Never let go of yourself in the present. To go into the past, you're getting into your mind. And you have to go beyond the mind or get before the mind. And that'll happen the more you practice meditation or self-investigation, the less you have to do with your mind. And the more close you are to living in the self. Now, some talk about that as living in the present, but I don't like that term of living in the present. That's another concept about time. I'd rather have it just about the self. And my definition of self is you can't go any deeper inside of you than the self. Just go deep inside of yourself. Robert used to say that all the time too. Just dive deeply into yourself, into that emptiness, into the darkness or the light within. That also means to feel within yourself too.
Yeah, and I've found that conflict, even positive conflict, that keeps me. Positive conflict in regards to things that are going well and you embellish yourself or really get into positive conflict, it seems like it's still conflict. It just pulls myself away from being where my mind should.
You're thinking too much.
Yeah.
Just relax. Relax into yourself. Fall back into yourself. The mind is a wonderful thing to lose. Frank, going to complete your thought?
I had another idea about that. Apparently, it just threw me off the internet. No, what I want to do is speak from another perspective. There has been, as I wrote to you in that email, I've had about 4 experiences now in the past couple of weeks where I'm sitting in meditation and suddenly, and I mean suddenly, I am suffused with light. And the first time it happened, I had to open my eyes to see if it was coming from through the windows. And it was still overcast outside. And of course, doing that stopped it. But it has happened 3 other times now. And obviously I can count them because they're so unique in experience. And afterwards, what I'm aware of is the dramatic contrast between mundane reality, which to me feels angular and sharp and lacking contrast. And that sense that occurred within that light, which may have only been a second, may have been less than that. But the sense was of being held in this benevolent embrace. It was just soft. It was like infinite being was holding the finite human. And the contrast was extraordinary. And of course, now what I'm doing is I'm sitting down and looking and waiting for, all right, like, where the hell are you? And that's obviously not helping at all. But ultimately, what's coming from that is with all of the teachings, yours and Nisargadatta's and Robert's and Ramana's and anybody else, what it really comes down to is the only thing I can totally trust is my own direct knowing. And there is something in that that is so deep. It comes from a place in me that I don't think I'd ever lived in before. And whether that is happening concurrently with this appearance of the light, I just know that timing-wise, there is synchronicity between that. And so I listen to all that you're saying, I listen to the comments from others, and I get back to the only thing I can do is trust my own direct experience, while at the same time recognizing that there really is no one here to have the experience. It's just happening. And the mind just can't make any sense of that statement at all, but that does feel real. And that's what's here to be said this morning.
You know, I used to say, and I still do, that if you think you had an enlightenment experience of any sort, big one or a little one, what was the experience and what conclusions do you draw from that experience? The other question you can ask is there any continuing feeling in you that is now there because of those experiences? Has your sense of self expanded or contracted or left something behind or added something? Now, that Shakti experience I had 11 years ago, where I felt the energy and the light arising in me and took it as God, has persisted. And certain people that I've been around bring that power sense more acutely than even back then. But without the light, without the bells and whistles. It's just around them. I feel so much power. Like the life force is come more alive around them. That happened with me with Dia. Whenever I was close to Dia, I felt this power growing in me like I felt 11 years ago. But ever since being close to her for a while, it stayed. The tremendous energy and the sense of power is there continuously. So I ask people when they're exploring themselves, when they have an experience, what has it done for them? What has it changed? Has it changed their belief system? Has it changed how they feel themselves? Do they feel more centered? Do they feel more complete? There was one Zen master I was with, Sun San Sunim, who was the most self-confident Zen master or spiritual teacher I ever met. And he'd always used to say, just one thing at a time, just go straight ahead, don't wobble. And I could see it in how he behaved and how he breezed into and out of rooms. It was like he totally owned the whole universe. And I feel that now too. It's all me. I own it all. And I'm secure in that knowledge that I own it all. That I'm not at effect of other people or things. I'm lodged in my own self state. And it's always there. And one thing I try to do is to help other people recognize that in themselves, that they are the center, they are the beginning and the end of their own universe, and that own universe cannot be owned or tricked into or be gotten rid of due to any other person. Nobody has the power to move you away from yourself once you find yourself.
My friend in Melbourne, whose family is from Tamil Nadu and is Brahmanic and Bhaktic, basically has always said that she has the life force and the power of Siddhis because every single act she has ever done is done non-volitionally. She is never ego-driven. It has nothing to do with the small self. And if she were to use that, she would feel that she would lose all of the other gifts of grace. And she steadfastly, as I've said, lives this life of pure bhakta, the whole family, because they live in God's grace and God manifest, and they know that. It is the most profound, my friend, this person who lives non-volitionally and her family in every act of abiding grace. I'm just in awe. I love her family. I'm loved by them, and it comes to me in waves. But that is exactly what you've said, Edgy, because it's non-volitional. It is absolutely God manifest, the life force, all of these exquisite things, the power of God manifest, the power of the life force is a gift that stands us in good stead beyond imagination, absolutely incalculable, indescribable, but it is there. And I love how you love us. You vouchsafe this gift to us in every satsang. Again, I love you.
I love you too. I love you too, Jay.
Thank you, Edgy. You know that.
I would give the satsang at this time to Frank, but his name doesn't come up as somebody I can give it to. Nor does Michael ever come up. My computer is biased against certain people here to give it over to. So it's going to be Bernadette and Chris again. You don't come up anymore, Mark. It doesn't look. It's forcing you out. So Bernadette and Chris, please be ready to take over.